Hello and welcome to Back in the Day Memories with my good friend John Barritt. Good to see you, John. How are you? How's
Good to be
everything?
here, fine, thank you.
We'll be talking about everything from the 60s and 70s, what it was like to live back then. So I will start off with John. What was it like growing up living in the 60s?
The distinct memory I have growing up in the 60s, in contrast to today, is the way in which Bermuda was developed, or rather undeveloped, or not developed. And what's most vivid for me is we lived on Langton Hill, North Shore, Pembroke.
Right.
And my father had bought a property down in Devonshire,
Right.
just next to the entrance to Devonshire Bay. And I remember when we moved down there and I said, oh my God, I'm in Siberia. I probably didn't use the expression Siberia,
Right.
but it was so undeveloped down there that most people couldn't appreciate that. Like Devon Heights was rugged coastline, there weren't many houses, and I thought, I'm not gonna have any friends, I'm gonna lose all my friends. And now I was gonna have to catch the bus to school as opposed to walking, and that was gonna be a difficult task.
Okay.
And I was really at sixes and sevens, but of course, you soon settle down, it was your home.
Right.
And what I remember about my years growing up there as a boy is I got exposed to a farm. Harry Lindo, that's the fellow who's the Lindo in Lindo's, the supermarket,
Okay.
had well, he didn't have the farm, his brother did, and cousin had a farm, but Harry had a slaughterhouse there, and that was his business. He had a small grocery store as well.
Okay.
And I got exposed to, looking after cows, bringing them in, and he had a slaughterhouse, which I have to tell you, I mean, it upset my mother for a time. I worked there, and helping to clean up and do all the things that one does in a slaughterhouse.
Okay.
And I learned to make time. Harry started his operation 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And I made a pretty good dollar, I have to tell you, for a boy, 11, 10, 11, no, I wasn't 10, more like 11, 12, and 13.
Okay.
I do it weekends, and particularly in the summer as well.
Okay.
And I won't tell you all the detail of the work involved, but it was a slaughterhouse proper. I mean, I got acquainted real quick with where meat comes from at a supermarket.
Okay.
And I enjoyed that. I mean, there were horses and cows as well that had to be tended and cared for.
Okay.
And that's an opportunity that many young Bermudians get today, that you'll see a farm of that sort.
Yes, that's right.
And that allowed me to earn money, because the opportunities to earn money back then, and this is something that is a distinct memory of the 60s, and people back then will remember, we used to collect mineral bottles. Mineral, we call them.
Wow.
The Barretts used to manufacture, and Bassett's as well, their pop in bottles, and they were returnable, and you return them and you got something. We were in shillings and pence then, so it must have been, and that's something else I remember about the 60s. You got threepence, 3 pence or something, and we'd collect these bottles where people threw them away, and you'd make a bit of pocket money. The other thing for young people to do was to deliver newspapers early in the morning.
That's right.
And I did that for a little while as well. And to do that, you needed a pedal bike. So being able to earn money to buy my first pedal bike led on to other things as well.
Sure.
And pedal bikes, of course, were a big item back in the 60s, particularly if you were under the age of 16.
Right.
And we'd spend a lot of time on them. Streamers, putting cars with clothes pegs in the wheels so they made a noise. And then we got into, actually, believe it or not, cutting them down. So that you would cut it down, drop the seat, put gooseneck handlebars on them so we would be really cool pedaling into town.
Sure, okay.
And others, of course, the older kids, older teenagers would be riding Cyruses or Zundaps or Mobilettes, and we would fashion ourselves after that with these bikes, and spent a lot of time on bikes. Remember, used to put them in incinerators. Every house would have an incinerator. You burn your trash, the stuff they would burn. Put the bikes there, burn the paint off, and then paint them ourselves. Sand them down and then paint them, because you'd buy a bike, a rally bike or something like that, and it would be a standard black or gray. And we'd sand them down and repaint them either bright red or green, or a combination of colors. Now, those were the things that I remember a lot about the 60s growing up as a boy.
Okay. Well, obviously, I wasn't born in the sixties, I was born in 1970. What I do remember from my childhood back then, living on Rocklands Estate, was that, like you mentioned, the bikes. There was always a big interest in bikes. My brother had a bike. My other brother,
pedal bikes?
pedal bikes, yeah, he had a chopper bike, and he was always working it. Always spray painting it and putting, like, he wanted mag wheels for the bike and all this, and it was just...
Chrome spokes were a big thing if you could get them, and smaller sprockets, you know, bicycles and even mobilettes would come with a larger sprocket.
Right.
And we'd get the smaller one. It would be harder for going up hills, but it was faster because you could turn the wheels quicker and you could go faster, and that was particularly true of bikes. And of course, back in our day, in the 60s, as you approached 16, you wanted to ride a mobilette or some type of motorbike. And that was the big temptation. And a lot of people would get caught riding underage.
Yes.
And the police, and there was a lot of pack racing on bikes to see who had the fastest bike.
That's right, yeah.
When I moved to Devonshire, the run, it was from the top of McGall's Hill down to Devonshire Bay, down to the flat there, to see who was the fastest. And the police were always out looking and chasing for people. And pack racing was the big thing back in that day. And the line between, of course, fun and crime was a fine one when it came to motorbikes.
Okay. Yes, I remember that. I remember like living in Rocklands, there was like a railway trail, and kids would always test out their bikes.
And they come from as far away as Paget, because I had cousins who lived up in the Tankfield property, and that was the run back then.
I remember being a little kid, being on the side of the road, and all I can hear was, "Aww." And obviously I'm just a short little guy, and this thing's just come flying by. And the thing is, kids back then had no fear. They had no fear of being on bikes.
I think probably people would say the same thing about kids today on the roads, and not just kids, but adults as well. You have no sense of mortality, I don't think.
That's right.
It's something you appreciate when you get older, I think. But the other thing back in the day about motorbikes was there would be single gear. Right. And with Cyruses and Zundaps, people who had a real mechanical bent would do it so that they could have two gears, and you drop gears in them. And I wasn't mechanically inclined, but people would have a pin that they could pull, so it would go back to single gear if the police ever stopped them, because geared bikes were not allowed. I don't think they may have been allowed if you were over 21, but all the bikes had to be single gear until you reached that magic age.
I didn't know that. I have to ask Kevin, my cousin, about that. He loved it. He loved bikes.
I vividly remember that. So a guy who had gears and who could drop gears was like really cool. He was really cool.
That's it. I always remember, I always got the feeling, it like growing up in the 70s, right? It was a very authoritarian time in the sense that parents were in charge, teachers were in charge. Everywhere you went, there was always, you had to have a sense of order. You know, you couldn't step out of line anywhere. There was always somebody in charge.
Well, you could, and I used to get a kick out of doing it too, precisely because it would evoke a reaction from those in charge, whether it was in school or somewhere else. I have to say I cut my teeth sort of rebelling, and just the way it was. And you challenge, and there was also a time where I think the world was opening up, and TV had come to Bermuda. Now, not TV like we have it today.
No.
And one vivid memory I still have is the first time I saw television at my grandparents' place, and the show was Mighty Mouse. Before the news, it wasn't on for very long, but I was quite taken by it.
Yes.
And so, but the world would open up in terms of what's going on in the outside world, and we were not unaffected by events that were happening elsewhere, where establishment and status quo was being challenged.
Yes.
And I also remember, and this I remember vividly too, Bermuda was a segregated society when I grew up as a boy.
Yes.
And I went to an all-white school, Saltus, and I was heavily into sport. I love sport, soccer and cricket, and even track and field. And I could never understand, and I used to challenge my teachers on this, how can you call us the champions, the inter-school champions, where we're not playing Barclay? And I knew from boys that I met
Right.
outside of school, like down at Devonshire Bay, that there were some very talented soccer players. In fact, I could see it at the senior level.
Right.
And I never understood why we weren't competing with them, and why. And indeed, you know, there were like white clubs and black clubs.
Yes.
And there was no real integrated club when I was growing up as a boy. And so when you face those things and you challenge them and you ask questions, some people would smack you down.
Yes.
And when I say smack you down, I don't mean physically.
Right.
I mean that you were questioning something that they didn't want you to question.
Yes.
And so I grew up in that era where people were questioning, were challenging, and I was doing it in my own circles as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I always remember, because like I spent half of my youth here in Bermuda and in England, and I always remember, you know, something would come to me and I would challenge a teacher, and like you say, they would smack you down because it's seen as insubordinate.
Correct. Insolent. Yeah, yes. That's a word. Insolent boy. Yeah.
And you're just asking a simple question out of curiosity. You know, it wasn't always that you wanted to be rude.
Well, sometimes I wanted to be though. I mean, that's part of growing up too, and I would do it certainly with some teachers and some people, because I knew it would provoke a reaction. I would do it for, as they say, just for the purpose.
Right.
And I did that. And I mean, I remember too, growing up, you know, when I started to go away to school, particularly university, I had long hair. And I took great delight in growing my hair and not cutting it, because I knew it was, can I use the expression, pissing some people off.
Yes.
It was annoying them. But it was all part of growing up and exercising the freedom that you had, that you enjoyed. And it was all part of the challenging, as we said back in the day, the establishment.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you know, we wore bell bottoms, we had our hair long, you know, I had purple bell bottoms as a kid.
I had purple bell bottoms.
I did. I had dark purple bell bottoms as a little boy with purple patches on. And, you know, my brother Paul would have the wing collars and the long hair, and, you know, it was always challenging society.
Yeah, yeah.
There always were.
It was like giving them the finger or poking them in the eye.
Yeah.
And as I say, I think it's all part of growing. It goes on from each generation in different forms of expression.
Right.
But I think that's all part of growing up, as it were, pushing the envelope.
Yes.
And seeing what more you can do, what you can do when you have the freedom to do it.
Right.
And like every other kid back in the day, that's exactly what I did. In Bermuda it was tough though, I have to tell you, because you were always known. This is a small place, 60s, and now today, it's 21 square miles and they're not making land anymore. No. Except maybe up at Dockyard for America's Cup, they did a little something, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
And you're always, you're known by your family, outside of your neighborhood, and that can be a very constraining thing. When I say constraining, it's sometimes kids today, when they grow up like that, live up to expectations that are imposed on them. And I always say, and I had this great opportunity when I went away to school, you no longer are constrained by those expectations. You're free to choose and develop as your as you know, suits your personality. Absolutely. And what you want to do. And that's a great thing about being able to get off the rock.
Yes.
And that was one thing I was very grateful to have had.
Yes.
Back in I went off in the towards the mid-late 60s.
Okay.
To high school and then to university.
Okay. I always found, like, in Bermuda, like you mentioned, very constrained. I always found, like, sometimes you walk in on eggshells, you know, because parents were always watching you.
Somebody's got their eye on you.
Yeah, somebody's got their eye on you. You know, like when you were hanging out with your friends.
And your dad would hear about it.
Yeah, and you did something stupid. Let's say you threw an egg, and it didn't mean to hit somebody. It was like...
Didn't matter.
Didn't matter. Oh my God, my dad's going to kill me. That person's going to be on the phone to my dad.
That boy stepped out of line. That's right. No, that's what I mean about how small it is. And that in some ways it's a helpful thing in terms of making kids think twice before they do something. But on the other hand, in some ways it's very restricting in terms of, well, I don't think I can do that. I wouldn't be expected to do that. And here we're not talking about necessarily naughty things.
Right.
We're talking about things where people want to try out and experiment.
That's very true.
And
That's very true.
That's not changed in Bermuda, I don't think. We've got a little more liberal in the sense of accepting of things,
Right.
but it's still, Bermuda's still constrained in the sense that expectations tend to be imposed by not only your family, and there's nothing wrong with that, but your neighborhood and your community is what you should or should not be doing,
Yes.
who you should or should not be.
Right.
And getting off the island, I think, helps people find their own way.
Yes, it did. It did. Because like when I moved to England at the beginning of the 80s, I think it did me a lot of good seeing a different part of the world rather than just staying on the rock all my life.
And different people, too.
Different people.
And people who would take you for who you are,
Yeah.
what you are, as opposed to where you come from, your neighborhood, who your daddy is.
That's true. I found that, you know, when I moved to Nottingham in 1977, kids were very open-minded to say, "What's Bermuda? I've heard that place. Is it America?" You know, I said, no, it's near America.
Yeah.
But they were very open-minded. They always wanted to know, and that was really good for me. You know, I just found the kids back then in Europe maybe more open to things. Maybe Bermuda didn't have the restrictions.
Yeah, I think and geography helps when you can go from one town to another, and
Yeah.
the other town doesn't know.
Yeah.
And of course, some people do some wild and crazy things, but it's not always about that.
No.
It's about finding your way.
Absolutely.
And Bermuda was very limited culturally back then. I mean, we had movie theaters, but we weren't getting first-run movies. The television was always like on a week's delay. I remember, like English soccer and that, it was always a week or 2 weeks later because they sent the film here by air or something like that. You always knew the result, and we were always maybe sometimes a year or weeks behind what was happening elsewhere. And if you go away, you get a better range, and you got a better range in terms of what you would be exposed to.
That's very true because, like, I mean, I'm a big television fan from back then, and like when I go into the microfilms, I look at like series like Bermuda, and it's like, wow, you got that 3 weeks later from its original transmission. And it's like, as a kid, that can be very frustrating if you're a fan of that show. You know,
and you're tracking what's going on in the States. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I was a huge fan of the $6 Million Man when I was a kid, but you know, checking the schedules back then, it's like everything. Lee Majors. So they were chop and change, and it was just like, well, why couldn't they just kept the same format as the United States?
I was thinking, you know, you mentioned your TV shows. I was thinking, I thought you might ask me, because I know your interest in this area, what shows there were in the 60s back here.
Yes.
And the ones that I can remember distinctly is Have Gun with Travel.
Yes.
Paladin, as they call it.
Okay.
And there was 77 Sunset Strip.
Heard of that.
And these are things we used to, Highway Patrol, Broderick Crawford. And Davy Crockett was another one, The Wild Frontier.
Okay.
And those were some big ones. And then the other one I remember that this is the late 60s, now going to the 70s, that everybody watched, was like one of the original soaps called Dark Shadows.
That's right,
with
yes.
Barnabas Collins.
Yes.
And that was like in my house, because my mother was keen on it, that was like absolute quiet time. I think it was like the soaps today on between 6 and 7 or 6:30 and 7, and people would track it very closely, and that would be the talking point.
Right.
And then the other thing I remember, though, there were a lot of soaps on the radio back then too, because I remember my mother used to have the radio on when she was ironing, and I'd go into some households, and I don't know the name of the soap that was on the radio.
Would it be like As the World Turns?
It might be, but I remember the tagline as clear as anything, which is, for all those in love and for all those who can remember. And then it would go into the day's cereal.
I wonder if that is Guiding Light.
I don't know, but I remember that on the radio so clearly, that tagline. Just like they used to have cereals in the movies too.
Yes.
Before you'd go each week, and there would be, and it would end with the lady tied up on the train track, and then who's going to save her, and then you'd come back the next week.
That's right.
And watch it. And here's another thing about that. When I grew up, segregated Bermuda, black people were sitting downstairs and white people upstairs.
Yes.
That used to I didn't like that.
No.
I thought the best seats were downstairs as a boy, right next to the action.
Right.
So I used to push to go downstairs to watch movies rather than sit upstairs, which cost more too.
Right. So, so you're saying that upstairs was the
Exclusively white.
Exclusively white.
That's right, and downstairs was reserved for blacks. They could only sit down, black movies could only sit downstairs.
Okay.
And I do recall sitting down there as a boy,
Right.
because I thought they were the better seats. But I would be looked upon as unusual.
Yes.
But a number of us would do it.
But did you get into any trouble? Did anybody
No.
say anything to you or
No.
give you a hard time?
No,
Okay.
I have no memory of anything like that. In fact, and when I played football organized,
Right.
when I came back from university, I joined Young Men's Social Club.
Mm.
That was a favorite team of mine growing up in the 60s. I thought they had some of the best teams in the island then,
Okay.
and some of the better soccer players. And so when I came back and I had a chance to play,
Right.
I joined Young Men's Social Club. And a lot of people thought, that's unusual. He's not playing for either BAA or what were the other hotels. I don't think it started then. It was BAA and maybe there's a team called Academicals or something like that.
Okay.
And I decided to go to the Young Men's Social Club, as did a number of the white fellas. There were a number of us who joined Young Men's Social Club back then, just by coincidence.
Okay.
And people say, they give you a hard time? Not at all.
That's
Not at
good to hear.
all. In fact, I remember some people saying, you're the reason I never joined Social Club, because you were taking up some of the spaces that would otherwise places that would have come to us.
Okay.
But it was a great experience in terms of, and I wanted to do that because I wanted to play
Right.
what they call Premier Division, what was back then,
Yes.
First Division ball with
Right.
good players.
Okay.
And, to me, that was the focus point.
Good.
No problems.
Good stuff. It's good to hear. I'm sorry, John. That's
We're out
all
of
we
time?
have for today. Thank you very much for coming by.
It's not easy covering 2 decades, although they seem to have passed like that.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you very soon from back in the day. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.